New Hampshire, despite its small size and overall irrelevancy when it comes to being the deciding factor in close presidential elections, is still quite the interesting state politically. The voters in New Hampshire are uniquely open to both parties, and as recently as 2020, the Democrats won a Senate race there by 16 points while losing the governorship by 34, a nearly 50% difference between the two races. But it's not always landslides in New Hampshire. In 2016, the state had a pair of two extremely tight races. In the state's presidential election, Hillary Clinton only beat Donald Trump by about 2,500 votes. In the concurrent Senate election, Maggie Hassan narrowly unseated Kelly Ayotte. Her margin of victory was a mere 1,017 votes. So, with all these crazy election results in New Hampshire, it's fair to ask, what's the deal with New Hampshire? What are New Hampshire's politics like? As always, let's go back to 2000, where our story starts. 2000 was a fantastic year for New Hampshire Republicans. They won the House vote there by nearly 12 points, and they held on to both of their seats in the chamber. And George W. Bush narrowly won the state at the presidential level. He finished 7,000 votes ahead of Al Gore. In fact, had Gore done just a little bit better here, he would have actually won the presidency. New Hampshire's 4 electoral votes would have put Gore at 270, the magic number. But this gets no attention because Florida was closer and was much more climactic. Anyways, after 2000, New Hampshire decided it would become a more democratic state. In 2004, New Hampshire was the only state John Kerry flipped in his loss to George W. Bush. In 2008, Obama did incredibly well here, winning it by 10 points and carrying every county. 2012 was another good year for New Hampshire Democrats, and despite Mitt Romney's northeastern roots, Obama carried it by 5.6%. Then, in 2016, as mentioned earlier, New Hampshire had 2 historically close races, both of which narrowly went to the Democrats. Then, finally, in 2020, New Hampshire voted for Joe Biden by a margin of 7 points, a solid victory. Democrats also did well in the Senate race here, where Jeanne Shaheen beat Corky Messner by 16. However, as you already know, there was quite the ticket split between the Senate race and the governor's race, where the Republican incumbent Chris Sununu was re-elected by nearly 34%. So, why was there such a big ticket split? Well, we don't know for sure, but we can make educated guesses. First off, a result like this wouldn't even have been that interesting just 15 to 20 years ago, as the country was less polarized and ticket splitting to this level was much more common. So, while polarization has set in across most of America, New Hampshire, along with many parts of the Northeast like Vermont, Massachusetts, and Maine, have stayed open to both parties. New Hampshire is also full of voters that could support either the Democrats or the Republicans. First off, New Hampshire is the 8th most educated state in the country, meaning that a substantial amount of New Hampshire voters have college degrees. As we know, college degrees are usually with Democratic voters. However, New Hampshire has stuff going for the Republicans too. It's the 4th whitest state in the country, and in 2020, Donald Trump did very well with white voters. So when you combine Republican demographic of white voters with the Democratic demographic of college-educated voters, what do you get? A swinging state like New Hampshire that is open to voting for both parties. Another aspect of New Hampshire's relative swinginess is its geography. Though one could easily characterize the state as one big suburb of Boston, I'd rather get more specific and get into the state's urban versus rural divide. The 3 largest cities in New Hampshire are Manchester, Nashua, and Concord, all of which voted for Joe Biden in 2020. However, the margins from these cities weren't as important for Biden as other cities in other swing states. In most swing states that voted for Biden, if you take away the 3 largest cities, the state flips to Trump. However, if you do this in New Hampshire, the state remains in Biden's hands. Why? Well, in addition to the cities in New Hampshire being less blue than most cities, New Hampshire's rural areas are quite the opposite. Unlike most of the country, rural New Hampshire is actually quite even between Democrats and Republicans, canceling out the deficit the Democrats face in the urban part of the state. New Hampshire is truly one of the few states where the urban-rural divide isn't as prevalent. So, all in all, what did we learn? New Hampshire is a state with unique politics. The state's electorate is mostly made up of white voters holding college degrees, and since the state is so small, there's room for plenty of maneuvers politically. The state's major cities, like Nashua, Concord, and Manchester, are redder than most other big cities, but the state's rural areas are bluer than most other rural areas. All these unique combinations and cross factors create one of America's last states unafraid of electing a Democratic senator and a Republican governor by landslides on the same ballot. New Hampshire voters are truly one of a kind.